Hey there. Ready to dive deep? We're going way beyond the surface today, exploring the life and powerful ideas of Stephen Biko, a truly pivotal figure in the fight against apartheid in South Africa. You might know him as a martyr, and we'll get to the tragic circumstances of his death, of course. But our deep dive today, it's about uncovering so much more than that. The thinker, the revolutionary, the man behind the label.
Absolutely. It's about understanding the ideas that got him killed, really, the philosophy that shook a nation.
We're pulling from this biography about Biko, and let me tell you, it is anything but a dry history lesson.
Oh, far from it.
Yeah.
When you hear some of these insights from this book, you're going to see why Biko's legacy is still so powerful today, even decades later.
To really get this journey, we need to rewind a bit, back to Biko's early years. Even as a kid, he was wrestling with the brutal realities of apartheid.
Yeah, just imagine this. His own father worked as a police clerk in the Native Affairs office.
Wow. Talk about a front row seat to the system itself. A system designed to oppress.
It's almost like a cruel irony, isn't it? Seeing the machinery of segregation and discrimination from within.
Absolutely. And it's clear that Biko wasn't content with just observing. He gets himself expelled, actually expelled from his first high school, Lovell High, for activism.
Wow.
A teenager standing up to authority, already showing that unwavering sense of conviction.
Speaks volumes, doesn't it? That willingness to challenge the status quo that young.
Yeah.
It's a thread, that runs through his whole life.
It really does. And that thread starts to weave something really powerful when Biko goes off to university. He ends up studying medicine at the University of Natal, a place you'd think would be, I don't know, bustling with intellectual thought and debate, right?
Right.
But Biko finds himself getting increasingly frustrated with the existing student organizations, even the ones claiming to oppose apartheid.
Yeah, you got to remember, this is the 1960s, a time when, well, the world was on fire with ideas of civil rights, decolonization. And in South Africa, you had many white liberals pushing for change, sure, but they wanted to work within the system, gradually dismantle apartheid. Biko saw this as, well, insufficient to say the least.
Yeah, he saw groups like the National Union of South African Students, NUSS, as out of touch, failing to address the urgent needs of black students facing this daily discrimination.
And it's this realization, this growing disillusionment that leads to a pivotal moment, the birth of the South African Students Organization, SOS, in 1968.
Okay, so let's talk about SESO for a second. This wasn't just some student group debating theory in a classroom.
No, no, no.
These guys were about action, making a tangible difference in black communities. Tell us more about that.
Exactly, SOS. They were about empowering Black South Africans from the ground up, not just talking about change, but rolling up their sleeves and doing the work.
Like what? Give us an example of the work they were doing.
Okay, so picture this. They set up legal aid clinics in townships, impoverished townships, offering a lifeline to those facing legal battles they couldn't afford on their own. Or imagine them fostering cottage industries, teaching women, for example, how to weave baskets, create beautiful beadwork.
Wow.
This wasn't just about survival, it was about economic empowerment, building a foundation for true equality, you see.
Providing the tools and the resources for people to lift themselves up, not just waiting for handouts. That's powerful.
And it gets to the absolute heart of Biko's philosophy, this idea that true liberation, it had to come from within, from building that Black self-reliance and pride that was the foundation for any meaningful change.
And this is where we get to the core of Biko's thinking. Black consciousness, it's a term that's thrown around a lot, but I think it's important to really unpack it, especially in the context of South Africa in the 1960s.
Absolutely. Black consciousness, in Biko's own words, is an attitude of the mind and a way of life. It's about recognizing the psychological effects of oppression, the insidious ways apartheid had seeped into the very core of how Black South Africans viewed themselves, their place in society.
It's about reclaiming your identity, your worth, in a system designed to strip you of it.
It's powerful stuff and deeply challenging, even to those considered allies in the fight against apartheid. Some people, they saw it as, exclusionary reverse racism even.
Right, right.
And that's where a lot of the misunderstanding came in, I think. Biko, he wasn't advocating for excluding anyone, like permanently. He used this analogy. Black people needed to set their own table first.
I like that.
It was about, establishing their own identity, their own sense of self-worth on their own terms. Only then, he argued, could you have true integration, true equality.
It's like that saying, you can't really love someone else until you love yourself, right? You got to build that strong foundation of self-love, self-respect as a community before you can really enter into these relationships with other groups.
Exactly. And this is where I think Biko's thinking, it goes beyond just,
Hmm.
race. It's about power dynamics.
Uh,
Any group that's been marginalized, oppressed, finding its voice, its strength from within.
Now, we can't talk about Biko without mentioning Donald Woods. Um, for those just tuning in, Woods was a white South African newspaper editor who at first actually disagreed with Black consciousness, thought it was divisive, even dangerous.
He did. And yet he became one of Biko's closest friends and a tireless advocate for his cause, which I think is really a testament to the power of Biko's ideas, is the ability to really engage in dialogue, even with those who opposed him vehemently, open their minds to a new way of seeing the world.
It really makes you think, right, here's someone who represents that very establishment Biko was challenging. And through their interactions, through like genuine conversation, Woods undergoes this total transformation, puts his own safety, his own freedom on the line for Biko and his cause.
And he pays the price, unfortunately. Woods is eventually forced into exile because of his support for Biko, his criticism of the regime.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it? The risks that people like Woods took to amplify Biko's message, bring it to the world's attention.
Yeah.
And speaking of risks, we do have to address the tragic reality of Biko's death in police custody.
Right. In 1977, Biko was arrested by the security police, a common occurrence, really, for anti-apartheid activists at the time, held without trial, subjected to these brutal interrogations.
And it's during this detention that he sustains a fatal head injury. But of course, the regime, they tried to cover it up.
Oh, yeah. The official story was that Biko had died of a hunger strike. A blatant lie. It was the work of journalists like Donald Woods risking their own lives to expose the truth that forced the world to finally confront the brutality of the apartheid regime and the murder of Stephen Biko.
Chilling reminder that ideas, especially those that challenge power, can be incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
And Biko, with his intellect, his eloquence, his ability to mobilize, to inspire, he was seen as a direct threat.
He was, and yet his ideas, they proved more powerful than any prison cell, any act of violence. Because even in death, Biko's legacy continued to grow, his words echoing across continents, inspiring these movements for social justice, for equality around the globe.
And that's what we'll explore in this final part of our deep dive. How did this young man, silenced at the age of 30, become such a symbol of resistance, of hope? How do his ideas continue to resonate in the 21st century, challenging us to confront injustice, to fight for a more equitable world? It really is incredible when you think about it, how one man, silenced so young, could spark a movement that's, well, it's still going strong.
It's the power of ideas, right? Biko's thinking, it wasn't confined to South Africa, or even to the fight against apartheid specifically.
That's true.
This message, self-definition, recognizing and dismantling the effects of oppression, the psychological effects, those are universal. Those resonate across cultures, across time even.
You really see that reflected in how his legacy has been carried forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talked about Donald Woods, forced into exile, but using his platform to make sure the world knew the truth about Biko's death. But then there's the music, the art, the literature, all this incredible creative output inspired by Biko's life and message.
Yeah, like think about Peter Gabriel's song, Biko.
Oh, yeah.
It became an anthem for the entire anti-apartheid movement, introduced a whole generation to his name, to his ideas.
Right.
And then you have the plays, the poems, murals springing up all over the world, keeping his spirit alive through art, through expression.
It's like this ripple effect, you know? One person's courage, inspiring countless acts of resistance, of creation.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that Biko wasn't just a symbol. He was a writer, a thinker, a mind. To really understand his legacy, you have to, engage with his own words.
And that's where his collection of writings, I Write What I Like, I mean, that becomes essential reading, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Because in those essays, those speeches, you hear Biko's voice directly. That sharp intellect, his incredible commitment to justice.
You see the depth of his analysis, too. He goes way beyond, simply criticizing apartheid.
Yeah.
He dissects the ways in which it, infiltrates the minds of both the oppressed and the oppressor.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's about understanding the psychology behind it, how it dehumanizes everyone.
Everyone involved, yeah.
And that's where I think Biko's message, it remains so incredibly relevant today. Because while apartheid may be officially over, we still see these systems, these power dynamics at play in so many different parts of the world.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Whether it's, Racial injustice, economic inequality, gender discrimination. The core principles of Biko's thinking, this idea of like recognizing your own agency, defining yourself on your own terms, challenging the status quo.
Timeless.
There really are. And that's what makes this deep dive, I think, this exploration of Biko, not just a history lesson,
Yeah,
but a call to action in a way.
I think so.
So as we wrap up here, I'm left with this question. What would it mean, to take Biko's philosophy, that idea of Black consciousness, and apply it in our own lives, in our own communities today?
What would it look like to confront those subtle, those overt ways in which oppression operates, not just out there in the world, but within ourselves, within our own spheres of influence?
It's a powerful question, and I think it's one that each of us, has to grapple with, to really think critically, question our assumptions, and recognize our own power to create change. Because the work of building a more just world, a more equitable world, it doesn't end with one person or even one generation. It's an ongoing struggle. And Stephen Biko, he gave us the tools, the inspiration to continue that fight.